You're safe. Miami will be a good location.
I think so too.
All it took was one wrong gate, one mistake. Now Sarah Cooper, a nurse running on caffeine and heartbreak, is 30,000 feet in the air beside a billionaire who doesn't believe in love. But before this flight lands, one of them will remember how to feel again. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. As the seatbelt light flickered off, Sarah exhaled shakily. Maybe it was the altitude, maybe adrenaline, but she suddenly felt every sleepless night, every buried emotion, every weight she'd carried alone for years pressing on her chest. She hadn't meant to tell anyone her story, least of all a stranger, but the words were already rising in her throat. "This isn't my flight." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, sharp and panicked in the hushed cabin. Richard lowered his tablet slowly, one dark brow arching. "Excuse me?" "This." She gestured wildly around the luxurious interior. "This isn't... I'm not supposed to be here." His expression shifted from confusion to cautious curiosity. "You're not my healthcare consultant?" Sarah's laugh came out strangled. "I'm a nurse. I was supposed to be on a commercial flight to London. I thought this was..." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "Oh God, I boarded the wrong plane." For a moment, Richard simply stared. Then something unexpected happened. He laughed. Not the polite corporate chuckle she'd heard earlier, but a genuine, surprised laugh that transformed his entire face. "You boarded my private jet by mistake?" He shook his head, still smiling. "That's actually impressive." "It's not funny!" Sarah shot to her feet, her exhaustion morphing into sharp-edged panic. "You have to turn it around. Tell the pilot to turn around." Richard stood too, hands raised in a calming gesture. "Let's just... Now! Please, I can't..." Her voice cracked. "I can't afford this. Whatever this costs, I can't..." "Ms. Chen." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Breathe." He moved to the cockpit, spoke briefly with the pilot, then returned with an expression that made her stomach drop. "We're already cleared over the Atlantic," he said quietly. "Even if we turned back now, we'd still cross international airspace. You're going to London either way." Sarah sank back into her seat, arms wrapping around herself. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. "Hey." Richard settled into the seat across from her, leaning forward. "You're not in trouble. And you're definitely not paying anything." She looked up, eyes burning. "I climbed onto a stranger's plane." "Technically, you were escorted onto my plane by my own staff." His mouth quirked. "If anything, this is our security failure, not yours." "That doesn't make it better." "No, but it makes it not your fault." He stood, moving to a sleek cabinet. "Coffee? Consider this an all-expenses-paid accident." Despite everything, Sarah felt the fight drain out of her. What choice did she have? They were 30,000 feet over the ocean, and she was too tired to do anything but surrender to the absurdity. She accepted the coffee he offered, their fingers brushing briefly. Outside the windows, dawn was beginning to break. Soft pink and gold bleeding across the horizon, painting the clouds in watercolor strokes. The tension in the cabin shifted, settling into something strange and quiet. Sarah sipped her coffee, feeling the warmth spread through her chest as exhaustion finally won its long battle. "I really am sorry," she murmured, her eyelids growing heavy. "Don't be." Richard's voice seemed to come from far away. "This is the most interesting flight I've had in years." Sarah meant to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The hum of the engines, the comfortable seat, the emotional tsunami of the past few days. It all pulled her down like a tide. She didn't notice when her head drifted sideways, coming to rest against Richard's shoulder, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Richard Chen didn't pull away. Sarah woke to warmth and the faint scent of expensive cologne. For a blissful moment, she forgot where she was. Then, awareness crashed back. The private jet, the mistake, the stranger whose shoulder she was currently using as a pillow. She jerked upright, heart hammering. "Oh my God! I fell asleep on you!" Richard looked up from his tablet, that infuriating smirk playing at his lips. "You needed it." "That's not—" She ran a hand through her disheveled hair, mortification heating her cheeks. "How long was I—" "About 2 hours." He gestured to the jacket draped over her lap, soft cashmere that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "You were shivering." Sarah stared at the jacket, then at him, words tangling in her throat. In the gentle light filtering through the windows, he looked different. Softer somehow, less like a corporate photograph and more like a person. "Thank you," she managed finally. Richard set down his tablet, his gaze steady on her face. "You remind me what real looks like." The words hung in the air between them, quiet and unexpected. Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight knot she'd been carrying. "Real is overrated," she said, trying for lightness. "Real is messy and exhausting and—" "Honest," Richard finished. He leaned back, studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. "When's the last time someone asked how you were doing and you actually told them the truth?" Sarah opened her mouth to deflect, then closed it. The answer was simple and devastating. She couldn't remember. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Another meeting request, another urgent matter demanding his attention. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he typed, "Cancel my morning meetings." "What are you doing?" Sarah asked. "Something I should have done months ago." He pocketed the phone, taking a morning off. Outside, the northern sunrise was painting the sky in impossible colors, deep orange bleeding into pink, gold spilling across clouds that looked close enough to touch. They were suspended in their own small world, somewhere between yesterday and tomorrow, between who they'd been and who they might become. The silence that settled over them wasn't awkward or empty. It was full and peaceful, the kind of quiet that only exists between people who've accidentally seen past each other's armor. Sarah pulled his jacket closer, breathing in the expensive fabric. "This is surreal." "Which part? The private jet or the existential crisis?" She laughed, surprised. "Both?" "Fair enough." Richard shifted to look out the window beside her. "For what it's worth, I think you're handling this remarkably well." "I'm having a breakdown at 30,000 feet. "Yes, but you're doing it with excellent posture." This time her laugh was genuine, bubbling up from somewhere deep and unpracticed. When was the last time she'd laughed like this? When was the last time anything had felt this unexpectedly light? She turned to look out the window, still smiling, and her breath caught. The clouds were thinning. Below them she could see the distinctive shape of a coastline, the glitter of sun on water, the sprawl of a city. "Wait." She pressed closer to the glass, frowning. "Are we descending?" Richard leaned over to look, his shoulder brushing hers. "That's Miami," Sarah said slowly, ice crystallizing in her stomach. "Why are we descending toward Miami?" The jet touched down with barely a whisper, palm trees swaying beyond the windows in warm, golden light that seemed to belong to a different universe than the gray London morning Sarah had left behind. She pressed her face to the glass, still half convinced this was an elaborate dream. "We're really in Miami?" "Yes," Richard said, gathering his things with practiced efficiency. "You didn't dream that part." The humidity hit her the moment she stepped onto the tarmac. Thick and tropical, carrying the scent of ocean and jasmine. Sarah stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, her London coat suddenly absurd, her entire life feeling like something happening to someone else. Richard was already on his phone, his voice crisp and commanding. "I need a car service to—" He glanced at Sarah. "Where's the wedding?" "Coral Gables, but I can just—" He held up a finger, continuing his conversation. "Coral Gables, yes. And check commercial flights to London departing tonight or tomorrow morning." A pause. "All of them? You're certain?" Sarah's stomach dropped at his expression. "Understood. Thank you." He lowered the phone slowly. "Tropical storm moving up from the Caribbean. All commercial flights are grounded until at least tomorrow evening." "That's not possible." Sarah grabbed her own phone with shaking hands, pulling up flight information. Cancelled. Cancelled. Delayed indefinitely. Cancelled. No, I have a shift Monday morning. I can't just—" "The wedding first," Richard said calmly. "When is it?" "Tomorrow at 6. Her mind was racing, calculating costs she couldn't afford. "I'll need a hotel. Something cheap. Maybe near the airport so I can catch the first flight out when they resume." Richard was already shaking his head, phone to his ear again. "Try the airport hotels. Any availability?" He listened, his jaw tightening. "None? What about downtown? South Beach?" Another pause. "I see, thank you." "Spring break weekend," he said flatly. "Everything's booked." Sarah felt the ground tilting beneath her. This couldn't be happening. This entire nightmare couldn't actually be happening. "You'll stay at my villa." She blinked at him. "What?" "I have a property here. 5 bedrooms, fully staffed. You'll stay there." "I can't afford—" "I didn't ask you to." His voice was firm but not unkind. "You're here because of my jet, my staff, my security failure. The least I can do is provide a place to sleep for 2 nights. Sarah stared at him, guilt and curiosity and something else she couldn't name warring inside her chest. Every instinct screamed that she should refuse, that accepting help from a stranger, a wealthy stranger, came with strings attached. But what choice did she have? "Just until the flights resume," she said finally. "Of course." The car that pulled up was sleek and black, driven by a woman who greeted Richard by name. As they drove through Miami's sun-drenched streets, Sarah watched the city blur past. Art Deco buildings, swaying palms, glimpses of turquoise ocean. Then the sky began to darken. By the time they reached the address, storm clouds were rolling in from the Atlantic, turning the light strange and green. Lightning forked across the horizon as the car pulled through iron gates. Sarah's breath caught. The villa was glass and white stone, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that seemed to dissolve the barrier between inside and outside. The ocean crashed against private beach beyond, wild and beautiful. Thunder rumbled overhead as Richard opened her door. "Welcome," he said quietly, "to the next 2 days." Something in his voice made Sarah's pulse quicken, a promise or a warning, she couldn't tell which. Morning sunlight flooded through the floor-to-ceiling windows like liquid gold, turning the ocean beyond into a canvas of impossible blues and greens. Sarah stood barefoot on cool marble, still wearing yesterday's clothes, unable to quite believe any of this was real. "It's like living inside a postcard," she breathed. Richard appeared in the doorway, somehow looking perfectly composed despite the early hour. He'd changed into linen pants and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the most casual she'd seen him. "Coffee?" he offered, gesturing toward the kitchen. The coffee turned out to be Cuban, strong and sweet, served in tiny cups that seemed designed for exactly this kind of morning. They settled on the terrace, ocean breeze carrying the scent of salt and hibiscus. "Tell me about the wedding," Richard said. Sarah wrapped both hands around her cup. my best friend from nursing school. We survived clinicals together, first jobs together, the absolute worst hospital administration together. She smiled softly. She's marrying someone who actually deserves her, which feels miraculous. You don't believe in miracles? I believe in hard work and compound fractures. But her smile took the edge off the words. What about you? Any miraculous weddings in your future? Richard's laugh was dry. My last relationship ended when she told me I was married to my company. She wasn't wrong. The honesty surprised her. Sarah studied him over the rim of her cup. This man who'd built empires but couldn't remember the last time he'd taken a morning off. I have a younger brother, she said suddenly. Daniel. He's in college now, studying engineering. After our parents died, She stopped, surprised by the tightness in her throat. I raised him, put him through school. It's why I work doubles, why I never travel, why you dream of opening a clinic instead of doing it, Richard finished quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. My father died 5 years ago, Richard said, staring out at the waves. Heart attack at his desk. I found him. He set down his cup with careful precision. I told myself I'd honor his legacy by building the company into something he'd be proud of. But somewhere along the way, I stopped building and started just grinding. Empire without purpose. You don't have to fix everything, Sarah said gently. His eyes met hers, dark and intense, and you don't have to carry it all alone. The words hung between them, mirror images of the same truth they'd both been running from. Then Richard's mouth quirked. Look at us. Strangers having breakfast therapy. Sarah laughed. A real one, bubbling up from somewhere deep and genuine. I blame the Cuban coffee. It's very emotionally honest coffee. Dangerously honest. But he was smiling too, and something warm unfurled in Sarah's chest. They sat in comfortable silence, watching boats drift across the distant horizon. The morning felt suspended somehow, as if the normal rules of time and space didn't quite apply here. Then the sky darkened. Sarah looked up as clouds rolled in with startling speed, turning the turquoise water gray-green. The first rumble of thunder sounded like a warning. Storm's back, Richard said, standing to close the terrace doors. Lightning flashed across the ocean, bright enough to leave after images. The lights flickered once, twice, and went out. In the sudden dimness, lit only by storm-filtered daylight, Sarah's eyes found Richard's across the terrace. He'd gone still, his gaze locked on hers with an intensity that had nothing to do with the weather. Thunder rolled again, closer this time. Neither of them moved. The rain stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving the world dripping and humid, the air thick enough to taste. Power flickered back on, but the storm's intensity lingered in the charged atmosphere. Richard found Sarah on the terrace, watching water droplets race down the glass railings. Come with me, he said. She turned, eyebrow raised. Where? My Miami. The real one. Something playful flickered across his face. Unless you'd prefer to stay inside worrying about Monday's shift. Sarah grabbed her sandals. He drove them along Ocean Drive in a vintage convertible she suspected he rarely used, pointing out buildings like confession sites. That hotel. My first acquisition. I was 26 and terrified. A glass tower. That one nearly bankrupted me. A boutique property draped in bougainvillea. That's where I realized I'd stopped enjoying any of it. Monuments to loneliness disguised as success, Sarah said quietly. Richard glanced at her, startled. Yes, exactly that. They ended up at a quiet marina, boats bobbing gently in their slips. Richard led her down a dock to a sleek yacht, smaller than she'd expected, more elegant than ostentatious. Come on, he said, offering his hand. Nurse's orders. You need fresh air. I'm pretty sure I never ordered that. Professional recommendation, then. Sarah let him help her aboard, his hand warm and steady against hers. The yacht cut smoothly through Biscayne Bay, Miami's skyline glittering to one side, the open Atlantic stretching endless to the other. Wind whipped Sarah's hair into wild tangles, spray misting her skin, and she felt something tight in her chest finally loosen. She laughed, head back, arms spread, completely free. Richard watched her from the helm, and Sarah caught his expression before he could mask it. Wonder. Like he'd forgotten people could look this alive. "What?" she called over the wind. "Nothing." But he was smiling. "You're the first person in years who sees me without calculating what I'm worth. Maybe I just haven't done the math yet. I hope you never do." Their eyes held for a moment too long. Then a wave rocked the boat, and Sarah stumbled. Richard's hand shot out to steady her, fingers wrapping around her wrist. Time slowed. His thumb rested against her pulse point. He had to feel how fast her heart was racing. The wind, the water, the whole glittering city seemed to fade until there was only the warmth of his hand and the question in his eyes. Sarah pulled back first, breathless. "We should head back." "Yes," Richard said quietly. "We should." Dinner was candlelight and fresh grouper, wine that probably cost more than her car. The power had returned, but Richard kept the lights low, preferring the soft glow of flames. "You make this place feel alive again," he murmured, refilling her glass. Sarah's breath caught. "Richard." Thunder cracked overhead, the storm's second act. Rain hammered against the windows with sudden violence, and the lights died. Complete darkness, except for the candles flickering between them, casting shadows that danced across Richard's face. He was closer than she'd realized, close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes. "Sarah." Her name was barely a whisper. "Tell me this isn't just me." The candlelight wavered. Outside, lightning illuminated the world in brilliant flashes. But the only light that mattered was the one burning in the shrinking space between them. Thunder rumbled softer now, the storm's fury fading to something gentler. Rain tapped against the windows like an apology. In the candle-lit darkness, the villa felt like its own world, untethered from everything beyond these walls. Richard stood, moving around the table with the careful deliberation of someone making an irrevocable choice. He stopped in front of Sarah's chair, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I forgot how to enjoy silence," he said quietly. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "You've had too much of the wrong kind." "And what's the right kind?" "This." She gestured between them, her hand trembling slightly. "The kind where you're not alone in it." Something shifted in his expression. A wall crumbling, a door opening. The candlelight caught the planes of his face, turning him into shadow and gold. Their eyes met. The air grew heavy with everything unsaid, with all the words they'd shared and the ones they hadn't, with the impossible coincidence that had brought them here and the undeniable gravity pulling them closer. Richard reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. His fingers brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, tucking it behind her ear with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "Sarah," he whispered. A question. A prayer. She answered by rising from her chair. The kiss that followed was slow, hesitant, weighted with the knowledge that this would change everything. His hand cupped her face while hers found the front of his shirt, fabric bunching beneath her fingers. He tasted like wine and possibility, like every reckless choice she'd never let herself make. For a moment, suspended in candlelight and the aftermath of storms, they both forgot who they were. Not a billionaire and a nurse, not two people from different worlds, just two souls who'd accidentally found each other in the space between destinations. When they finally pulled apart, Richard rested his forehead against hers, breathing unsteady. "I wasn't supposed to feel again," he murmured, so quietly she almost missed it. Sarah's hand came up to cover his where it still cradled her cheek. "I wasn't supposed to let myself." They stood like that as the candles burned lower, as the rain softened to mist, as the world outside continued spinning without them. Eventually, they moved to the sofa, Sarah curling into the corner while Richard sat close enough that their shoulders touched. They talked in whispers about nothing and everything. Childhood dreams, favorite books, the small moments that shape a life. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, Sarah's eyes grew heavy. She fought it, not wanting this night to end, but exhaustion won the battle it had been waging for days. Richard felt the moment she surrendered, her weight settling more fully against him. He shifted carefully, draping his jacket over her shoulders, brushing his fingers once through her hair. In sleep, she looked younger, the lines of worry smoothed from her face. Beautiful and real and entirely too dangerous to everything he'd built his life around. "I wasn't supposed to feel again," he whispered to the darkness, to her, to himself. But feeling had never asked permission. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows with ruthless clarity, burning away the magic of candlelight and storm. Sarah woke slowly, awareness returning in fragments. The unfamiliar sofa, the jacket that smelled like Richard, the tender feeling of her lips, and the cold weight of reality settling over her like a shroud. What had she done? The storm cleared overnight, leaving behind a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Sarah's phone buzzed with flight notifications, departures resuming, her shift Monday morning suddenly very real again. She packed quietly in the guest room, folding borrowed clothes, tucking away memories she had no right to keep. Through the window, she could see Richard on the terrace, statue still, staring at the ocean with his jaw tight and his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Every instinct screamed at her to slip out quietly, to leave a note, to make this easier. But Sarah had never been good at easy. She found him exactly where she'd seen him, the morning breeze ruffling his hair. He didn't turn when she approached, but his shoulders tensed. "Flights are running," she said softly. "I know." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they'd shared in 48 hours that felt like a lifetime. "Stay." He turned then, and the raw honesty in his eyes nearly broke her. "Just stay." Sarah's throat tightened. "I can't. My brother, he's depending on me for tuition. My patients are expecting me Monday. I have a life, Richard. A real one, with responsibilities and—" "I know." He stepped closer. "I know all of that. I'm not asking you to give it up." "Then what are you asking?" "Let me visit your world." The words came out rough, unpracticed. "Let me see what real looks like when it's not stolen moments between storms." Sarah smiled, and it ached. "You wouldn't fit. Your suits probably cost more than my rent. You have empires to run, board meetings, hotels in a dozen countries. I'll learn." Another step, close enough now that she could feel his warmth. "Teach me how to fit, please." The please undid her. "Richard." His name was half protest, half prayer. We both know what this was. A beautiful accident. A moment out of time. But we live in different worlds. So we build a bridge. Bridges take time, and effort, and I have both. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing like they'd been doing it for years instead of days. "I spent 5 years building monuments to loneliness. Let me spend the next 5 building something that matters." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that billionaires and nurses could make this work, that fairy tales happened to exhausted women who boarded the wrong plane. But wanting wasn't enough. "I have to go," she whispered. He nodded slowly, understanding and heartbreak warring in his expression. Then he pulled her close, and she went willingly, burying her face against his chest as his arms wrapped around her. They stood like that for a long time, trembling, unspoken, holding on too tight and not tight enough. Sarah memorized the sound of his heartbeat, the warmth of his embrace, the way he smelled like ocean air and expensive cologne and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, neither could speak. The car service arrived too soon. Richard carried her bag himself, then pressed something into her hand, a single white rose from the villa's garden, still damp with morning dew. "For courage," he said quietly. Sarah clutched it as she slid into the car, turning back one last time. Richard stood framed in the doorway, backlit by golden light, the rose's twin still in his hand. Their eyes met through the window, and then the car pulled away, carrying her back toward reality while he remained standing in their beautiful, impossible dream. New York welcomed Sarah back with its familiar symphony of sirens, car horns, and the relentless pulse of a city that never stopped moving. The hospital felt smaller somehow after floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, fluorescent lights instead of sunlight, the beep of patient monitors replacing the rhythm of waves. Yet something had shifted. Sarah found herself humming during her shift, smiling at patients who looked surprised to see such lightness in their overworked nurse. The white rose, carefully pressed between the pages of her favorite book, had already dried into a keepsake she couldn't bring herself to throw away. Miami felt like a dream. Richard felt like a dream. But dreams didn't text good morning every day for a week. Dreams didn't send articles about community clinics with the note, "Reminded me of you." Sarah told herself not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment. She was thinking exactly this when she stepped out of the hospital a week later, exhausted from a double shift, snow just beginning to dust the sidewalk. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Sarah's heart stuttered. She knew that car, but it couldn't be. The driver stepped out, offering her a small wrapped box with a professional nod. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, a white rose, impossibly fresh, and a tiny seagull keychain, wings spread in flight. The note was written in strong, elegant handwriting. "You said I could visit your world. I'm here. R.H." Sarah looked up, searching. And there he was. Richard stood by the car, snowflakes catching in his dark hair, wearing jeans and a wool coat instead of a $1,000 suit. He looked nervous. He looked real. He looked like someone who'd spent the past week rearranging his entire life to be standing on a New York sidewalk in the cold. "Hi," he said, that familiar smirk softening into something genuine. "You're here." Sarah couldn't quite believe it. "You actually came." "I said I would." He stepped closer, hands in his pockets like he wasn't sure of his welcome. "I cleared my schedule for 3 days. No board meetings, no conference calls, just time, if you want it." "Richard, Her voice caught. "I work 12-hour shifts. I live in a studio apartment with questionable heating. My idea of fine dining is the taco truck on 5th Avenue. "Does the taco truck take walk-ins?" A laugh bubbled out of her, bright and disbelieving. "You're serious." "About tacos? Always." His smile turned tender. "About you? Even more." Snow fell harder now, dusting their shoulders, turning the city soft and magical. Richard reached out, his gloved hand finding hers. "Next time," he said quietly, "let's make sure you board the right plane, but still end up with me." Sarah looked at him. This man who'd rearranged empires to visit her world, who held a seagull keychain like it was precious, who was looking at her like she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed life. "I get off at 6 tomorrow," she said. "There's this cafeteria inside with truly terrible coffee. Sounds perfect." They walked toward the hospital entrance together, snow swirling around them, two people from different worlds learning to build a bridge. Behind them, the city hummed its endless song. Ahead, warm lights and the promise of terrible coffee and conversation that would stretch into hours. Sarah squeezed his hand, and Richard squeezed back. Two worlds, one heartbeat. Proof that sometimes the wrong flight leads exactly where love intends. You just have to be brave enough to board. Thank you for watching to the end. I believe you enjoyed it. We have a lot of other interesting stories like this lined up for you already, so click the image showing on your screen to watch the next. Don't forget to subscribe.